Four. Yeah, four board members, right? They went from 9 to 7, and it's us, just majority.
Bear with us for just a moment. I'm going to see it.
Yeah, I'll write that. Take that one. I got one. Can I go ahead and get it? Yeah, they're like. Says live. Oh, what they do. You can leave that. No, it's better to still on top. Yeah. Offer that. So it's. Yeah.
Did you? Good.
People talk about that. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Right, well, that's good. Yeah. Sometimes like walking and then it's hard to do minutes. Go to the back.
Right. Yeah, that's tricky. So is it going up on?
But I didn't buy on YouTube. But unless we're talking, I don't know. I didn't hear that.
Good evening. This is a special meeting of the Warren Planning Board, Monday, March 13th, 6:30 p.m. Present is Brett Bovine, Fred Massey, Michael Gerhard, and Jim Lefferts. So that constitutes a quorum. And the first order of business is under the Waterfront Overlay District Development Plan Review, zoning ordinance, Article 26. Before we start, Davison Bolster is here representing the Warren Historic District Commission as a non-voting member of the group, as this is part of the Waterfront Overlay District Development Plan, and that is part of the town policy to allow a member of the housing the Warren Historic District, sorry, yeah. Is it old or is it historic?
Yes.
We had that the last couple of weeks ago. And still ringing in my mind. Okay, so the first order of business is owner applicant Spencer Morris, location 241 Water Street, Plat 4, Lot 45. The conversion of one commercial unit to one residential unit in an existing 4-unit mixed-use building. And there's a request for replacement of windows. The waterfront, the Warren Historic District Commission, my understanding, has reviewed the plan and approved the exterior changes that you presented. So floor is yours, Spencer. Yeah.
Good evening. This is Spencer Morris, resident of Warren, 18 Cole Street, Warren, Rhode Island. And first of all, I just want to thank the committee here for all the extra effort you guys have put in lately. Special meeting and everything to accommodate us. I appreciate that. Yeah, so as Chairman Massey just stated, we have a 4-unit mixed-use building on Water Street. And on the eastern side of that, facing Water Street, is been an office space as long as we've owned the building, and we would like to convert it into a residential for residential use. As far as the Historic District Committee goes, yes, I've been before them. We have a tentative approval based on our discussions. I've yet to submit the final plans, but would be to retain the storefront windows, the big plate glass windows on the eastern face on Water Street, and replace those same type of windows on the north and south facade with similar to the rest of the building. We renovated the building in, I think, 1996 or something, and put those windows in. And formerly, they were just blocked in with a cinder block. There were no windows in the building at the time we purchased the property. Yeah, so reason for doing it, our interest in doing this, is that relevant to?
Sure, yeah, I mean, I think the one concern we have here, and
Yep.
based on the new ordinance that the town council came up with, is limiting the number of Airbnbs.
Okay,
And I think, you know, from our standpoint, the fewer of those, the better, in terms of providing affordable housing for folks and keeping the rates of rentals. So
Sure.
the town council has already taken steps to limit those. And my understanding is there's already one Airbnb in your building at this point.
well, yes, there are actually 2. My mother resides in one of the units half the year, and the other half of the year, in order to kind of keep a flexible space, we do short-term rentals. That's on the northern unit facing the park. On the southern unit, we do short-term rentals all year round. Yes.
So this one, you know, I would, as a condition, I would say that this could never be an Airbnb because you're already, I believe.
Grandfathered in for the 2 units. Yes, that's correct.
You're what?
We're grandfathered in for the 2 existing units.
Okay, is that true, Ben? They're grandfathered in?
So there is a provision within the new ordinance that grandfathers anyone who was in compliance registered with prior to the effectiveness of the ordinance. However, this new unit that he's proposing
Correct.
would not be
covered. And
subject
in
to that,
fact, would be,
correct. It would
because
have
of
to
the
comply
existing
with-
situation, would not be an Airbnb.
Yeah, and I would say that it's not our intent to do short-term rentals. I mean, we're not proposing that that's going to be the use. Yeah, so
So you'd
we're,
agree to that condition that this.
oh, absolutely.
would not be
Yeah, I mean,
ever used for that.
I think there's there's a belief that these Airbnb are easy to operate and you know, generate significant revenue, but actually in our experience, and we've done this quite a lot. We'll be very happy to have a long-term
Oh,
tenant.
full-time, yeah.
That's right.
Okay, great.
Do you need a separate door for this unit, or is it going to be served by the same?
It'll be the main entry facing Water Street would be used as one access, and we're also going to put we intend to put another doorway on the south facade, providing direct access to the parking area on the side.
So another door is.
Another doorway, yeah, that's correct. Would not be visible from the street, though.
And the Historic District Commission reviewed that as well.
Yeah.
So we would say pending approval by the Historic District Commission for the, as you say, you've got a handshake agreement right now, but
Yeah, he was, the applicant hadn't brought, because we sort of reworked the plan during the meeting, so he was gonna come back with a formal plan based on some research about front plate glass and so forth. And we would do a final review and approval at that point, which would be coming up at our next meeting in a couple of weeks.
Great. So I mean, I would think that from our recommendation, we can simply put that in as a condition, which looks like it's not going to be a problem.
Yeah, and that's no bearing on the use, obviously, it's
Right.
just the building, you know.
And further, the prohibition against the short-term rental.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
statutory. at this point,
Anything
I think.
else? Anyone? And you're all set for parking as well, I'm assuming.
I believe so, yeah. We seem to be able to manage that pretty well.
So where is the parking?
So we have one parking lot on the lot, and we have arrangements in the neighborhood for additional parking. So,
Yeah, I mean, I remember when we went through this process in the first place.
Yeah.
You had adequate parking for all of the units
right, and we're also going from a more intensive parking use to a lesser intensive parking use in terms of the statute, so.
Can I have a motion
I'll
to,
move approval with two conditions. The first is that final approval is granted by the Historic District Commission, and second is that there's a prohibited using this as a short-term rental Airbnb.
no
and this
problem.
is as a recommendation, an approval of the recommendation, it's not an approval of the actual.
It's actually approval of the plan and the recommendation to the zoning board.
What he said.
Just because if he
Yeah.
did not have to go with the zoning board, it'd just be a approval outright, but
I
now
see.
because you do a recommendation also to the zoning board.
And just to clarify, so the regulation is there's two short-term rentals, a maximum of two short-term rentals allowed in that 4-unit building. So does it matter to, like, have you determined which two are short-term? Does the zoning board need to like this new unit, is that going to be the
Actually,
one
it's
that's,
only 3 units.
well, that's right,
By
there's
the,
3,
by the basis of the new
residential.
ordinance, there should only be one Airbnb. Or one
because of the,
short-term rental, because that in the, you would need 4 to have 2. If you've got 3, you only have 1. If you've got 2, you only have 1, as the way that the ordinance is written.
okay, because it's 3 residential units, 1 commercial, so this structure would be allowed 1 short-term rental?
But it was grandfathered in.
Oh, the 2 are grandfathered in,
Yeah,
okay.
Or the,
I just didn't know if the town needed to know which of the 3 residential units are going to be the short-term rentals. The 2 that are grandfathered in, is that the ones to?
Yeah,
And
Yeah,
then
I mean,
this
that's
new
our
one?
intent,
Okay,
but I mean, you
Okay.
just brought up a good point. I don't know, I guess we could shovel the deck at
I
some
just,
point.
that's.
I would
my
say that the
question.
units right now that are being
Yeah.
used short-term is the ones that you get the benefit of being grandfathered. This new unit is conditioned that it cannot be. I think it's a clearest way.
Yeah, because I mean, just just to nail this thing down, we have to register each unit with the state of Rhode Island and with the town of Warren. So for us to monkey around with the uses on the different, that's just problematic. So it ain't gonna happen.
Okay, and then maybe a condition, that it meets building code requirements, the unit, I don't know if the site plan's been reviewed already, but the egress requirement.
Yeah, because we're moving from commercial to residential.
Yeah.
Okay,
We have a plan before the
so
building.
that's, you have that as and can I have a second to that motion? Brett, all in favor? Aye. Those opposed? I hear nothing.
Thank you very much. Okay.
Thank you, Spencer. And the next item is convert the owner applicant Paul Bullock, Kate Dixon, location 277 Water Street, plat 4, lot 95, conversion of an existing structure from residential to commercial use, retail, bakery, cafe, office. And Kate?
Thanks for having me. Kate Dixon, so I'm the applicant, and then Paul Bullock, the landlord, did not want to be present, but has signed off on the ideas.
And our understanding is that you would be operating these two businesses at different times. So when the bakery is open, the restaurant is not. When the restaurant is open, the
Pretty
bakery
much exactly, yeah. So when we opened sort of the pop-up cafe that we were running out of the foyer of my restaurant during the pandemic, when we didn't do any indoor dining, we kept complimentary hours. So we opened at 8, closed by 2 or 3, 4 o'clock kind of being the upper maximum there. So that gave us time to kind of change over. And in our experience, that's the demand for that product. So we make, sourdough breads, pastries, coffee. And so really by 2 or 3 o'clock, the demand for that is over with anyway. So it'll be a complimentary sharing of the resources like the parking. My imagination is that the actual cafe space will have very little contribution to the waste, but we'll be sharing those resources too at Bywater.
Now, are you renting the entire building?
I am, yeah. So
So does that also have parking behind it?
we're talking about 277?
Yeah,
Water Street?
across the street,
No, so there is no parking with the building.
but you're renting the entire building.
Yeah.
correct?
Mhm. Yeah, it was
Wouldn't that have to have some parking, a building in existence, particularly since it was residential?
I'm not aware of,
Yeah,
the residential.
How many seats is the big shop currently?
About 16. 16,
and you have, so what you're saying is that the 4 spots for parking would be dedicated
they'd be
on
across the
the
street, yeah.
Bywater
So, yeah,
property.
exactly. So our plan was to just get some sort of nice complimentary signage done that kind of tied the two buildings together a little bit. And to be very clear in that signage that it was parking for either Bywater, which would not be operating in the daytime, and then the bake shop, which would be right across the street.
Why would it be that a residential building would not have any parking?
It was a pretty recent changeover, and I don't believe it was really the plan of the landlord, if I may. I think. Oh, did he get a variance? Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, I just,
Yeah,
I don't understand the question.
if you have an existing building and it was classified residential, I'm assuming, or even commercial, I'm assuming that it had some parking associated with it.
How old's the building?
a couple hundred years.
Mr. Chair, I'm assuming that they converted, they got a variance to the
Yeah.
conversion offset of parking.
There've been 2 or 3 residential tenants in the
Right.
time it's been residential, not very many, and they've always used on-street parking.
And where were they parking, you know?
Just on street, just on Water Street or the side streets,
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
Yeah, if it's 200 years old, it's conceivable a building was built with no parking at that time.
Yeah, I'm just assuming. Well, you had a character, right, so someplace for the horse.
What was that?
Okay.
So, the cafe, could you
Yeah.
tell me a little about what's going to be made there? Do you need a special use permit from zoning to open a
So.
food establishment?
Yeah, so actually ideally we'll be making nothing there. So the conversation I've been having with the Department of Health is to keep using Hope and Main as our primary location where we make all our food.
Oh,
So that's exactly what we did. I think a lot of people thought that we were baking bread and pastries out of the Bywater kitchen during the pandemic, but we're far too small for that. So really, we were renting Kitchen B over at Hope and Main and just trucking everything down the quarter mile down the street. And that's where we.
So what do you expect the menu to look like in the cafe?
So my hope is to bring it back kind of where we were when we closed. So we closed in September, the daytime portion of the restaurant that was known as the Bake Shop. And it was very limited. So we had, a rotating selection of maybe 4 to 6 pastries at any one time, a selection of 2 or 3 breads, kind of changing seasonally. And then in terms of prepared foods, very simple, just to kind of utilize what we already had going on in the kitchen. So maybe 1 sandwich, 1 salad selection, that kind of thing, and all kind of grab and go.
Is that on the second floor? The seating is on the second floor?
Exactly. So on the first floor, we'd have a little bit of handicap accessible seating. So for someone who couldn't do the big stairs, and then a few tables around the second floor. I don't, have you been into 277? So there's a large staircase that kind of takes up a good amount of the space on the second floor. So you can really only do seating kind of around the perimeter of it.
And you're going to import all the food from Hope and Main?
Yeah, so Hope and Main is going to continue to be our commissary kitchen. There's just really no way to financially or logistically justify getting a commercial kitchen that I would need into
Too
that
small.
space. Too small, exactly. Yeah, it'd be really limiting. So
Thank you.
thank you.
Any other questions?
I have a question about the written, I didn't notice in the application a written agreement with the property owner to use shared parking. Is that something that you've executed already or that you'll provide?
So
to the
yeah,
owner?
so right now I'm the primary tenant at 54 State Street, so I could definitely execute one between myself and then the landlord of 54 State Street is happy to sign anything that.
Yeah, I just didn't know if that's something the zoning board would be looking for. Then
Certainly.
yeah, so you might
Yeah.
need that.
We can do that.
The other thing is, this is, makes sense given the fact that you are operating both
That's the
places,
hope, yeah.
but sharing between 2 different landlords,
Yeah.
essentially.
Yeah.
So I would, want to see a condition that this is just for this use
Mhm.
with this operator. So in other words, we're not approving the the new building as a standalone
Mhm.
that could be, should you decide, I don't want to
Right.
do bakery there, that at that point, we have to come back to zoning. Because clearly the parking situation is only possible
share.
because of the
Common
agreement, right?
common business.
Common business owner, but 2 separate landlords.
Yeah.
So that would be a condition that I would. put
Certainly,
into
the
the
zoning
record.
board would require the facts of the business to be put on the record and be part of the special use permit, and therefore, if there's any deviation from that special use permit, it's a violation.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is that cool with you?
Oh, for sure.
Great.
So, yeah.
Anything else? I note that, Tyler Dixon and Asim Harris have arrived. I don't, you can't vote on this because you walked in late, so, just those who were, here, motion to, approve and recommend with following conditions that were noted. Did you get those, Allison, the condition? Okay, I'll
So-
make- go ahead.
So moved.
Okay.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye,
Thank you so
all
much.
right, good luck.
Thank you.
When do you expect to open? Next question.
The $1 million question. So we got a contract to do the bread and pastry vending at the farmer's market in Providence, which starts in May. So I kind of have a deadline to at least be up and running from a production standpoint by Mother's Day, by May. So it would be great if that would also be reflected in the point of sale retail location too, but we'll see. We'll see what the Department of Health has to say. That'll be the big pickup.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, owner applicant, Water Street, Warren LLC, Sam Glenn, DBA Chomp Kitchen and Drinks, location 279 Water Street, Plat 4, Lot 96. This is a request for an amended site plan, including changes to parking and dumpster location. The revision includes shared and off-site parking agreements. It is noted that there is currently a stop work order on this property due to the fact that the owner began work in violation of the agreement that had been made with the zoning board relative to the existing parking and also the boundaries of the restaurant itself. So
Good evening, members of the board, Michael Resnick on behalf of the applicant owner. And I'm going to give you a brief history of the genesis, why we're back before this board again. And with respect to the three specific applications that we filed with this board, as well as the zoning board, which is scheduled to be heard on March 15th. I'm also joined this evening by our traffic expert who developed the shared parking plan that's before you this evening, Paul Bannon from Beta. And he's here to provide some testimony, minutia of the plan, and to answer any questions the board may have. But to go back to the genesis of this, and you are correct, Mr. Massey, there is a stop work order on the property right now, solely related to a stone patio that's been constructed. So it's very important for this board to understand that the cease and desist relates solely to that patio. What occurred here is my client understood wrongfully that he could rely on shared parking without the approval of the zoning board and without the review and recommendation of this board. So what happened is this patio was constructed. There are no building permits that I understand that would be required for this patio, but it did effectuate a change in the parking because at first we believed that we lost 6 spots. So essentially that there was a 6-spot deficiency per your zoning code. Upon retaining Mr. Bannon and taking a look at it more specifically, we determined that there was in fact an 8-spot deficiency based on the patio that was constructed. So the zoning violation that you're referring to flowed simply from the construction of the patio and the elimination of those spots. So that's one of the reasons why we're before this board. Another reason we're before this board, and I'll discuss the 3 applications in a moment, is because when we received that original zoning board approval, which by the way was a 5-0 unanimous vote, and that was May 26th, 2021, there was a specific condition in that decision that identified where the dumpster was to be located. After the decision, there was an abutting property owner. And actually the property was just previously before you this evening. It was the previous agenda item. And there was an appeal filed in Superior Court. There was also a lawsuit that was filed. There was a settlement agreement that was entered into between the parties. And part of that settlement agreement was a revised easement agreement that solely relates to Mr. Glynn's property and Mr. Bullock's property. And part of that agreement, so that there would be good relationship and coexistence with respect to this easement, was to move the dumpster because Mr. Bullock had an issue with the location of the dumpster and its proximity to his property. So we did that. So when I get to the dumpster modification location aspect of this, I want the board to understand the genesis of that was trying to think ergonomically, where's the best place to situate this dumpster and also honor our relationship with our neighbor and to make a lawsuit go away. And so very, very quickly, the applications that are before you and will be before the zoning are 1, a special use modification for Wedge. Now, Wedge, which is one of the tenants, and you don't strike that. Let me just start from the very beginning. The property has 3 separate buildings, 3 separate tenants. One is Chomp, one is Cafe Water Street, one is Wedge. The Wedge application for a modification to the special use permit is simply curtailing the hours that were presented to you as far as operation, because they're limiting those hours, and also to rely on that shared parking agreement. And so Wedge will be running from 11 to 6. It's open on Wednesdays, Thursdays, Fridays, and Saturdays with peak hours in the late afternoon, and it's actually closed on Sundays, Mondays, and Tuesdays. So that special use permit that's before you, modification relative to Wedge, is just to limit those hours and to request permission to rely on that shared parking agreement that we're going to discuss in a moment. The other application, as I suggested, is the dumpster relocation application, which is really just a modification of that original zoning approval. When Mr. Bandon comes up here, he'll be able to discuss why we placed it as we did, and that's included in the plan set. The other one, of course, is an application to rely on shared parking. Now, we believe that the shared parking agreement that is part of your package obviates the concern relative to that 8-spot deficiency based on these uses, based on the cafe's peak periods being in the morning, based on Wedge's peak periods being in the late morning, early afternoon, and based on Chomp's peak hours being later towards, I believe, 4 p.m. To 10 p.m. Now, after we identified the zoning violation and conferred with you staff, and we took these steps to cure this issue, which are these 3 applications, we also did or took some action to actually obviate the parking issue completely. And I stand before you this evening based on 2 leases that were obtained, and I can tell you that it's our position that we are actually in compliance with the town's parking requirements. Now, that's not to suggest that we don't want the shared parking. It creates a much better internal flow of traffic. It's just a better organization. But the reality is that your zoning ordinance allows a business to rely on off-site parking that is 400 feet within the boundary lines of the property. And Mr. Glenn, in the interim, after all these materials were filed, was able to obtain those 2 leases. So we have located at 66B Church Street with Old Marina LLC, 8 spots, which completely cure the deficiency which are well within 400 feet of the property, approximately 200, but I'll rely on Mr. Bandon for the specifics. And we were able to secure a 5-year base term and a 1-year option for 5 years at our discretion. I can tell you that the applicant wanted to get 20, but that's all that we were able to get. And I believe, based on my reading of the ordinance, that in and of itself cures the zoning violation, cures the cease and desist issue, and places us in conformance with your parking requirements. That said, we're not withdrawing anything we filed. We think we're making a better development based on what's being filed. In addition to that lease, which will run for a total of 10 years, we also secured 6 additional spots. But those spots, unfortunately, we were only able to secure for a month-to-month basis. We hope to have them for some time, but the property owner that we dealt with would give us no more than a month-to-month arrangement. And that's 325 Water Street, and that's J.E. Petroci, Rhode Island. I hope I'm pronouncing that name appropriately. And the reason for that is we had heard in conversations with staff and members of the community that there was a concern that employees, might park on the street and congregate and have a cigarette after work or something to that effect, and in some way disrupt the residential community in that area. So what we've done is we've gotten those 6 spots because we promised, as part of our zoning board original application, that no employees would park on site. Now, there was no requirement that we actually provide employee parking, but instead of relying on the street, instead of relying on municipal parking, we've gone out and we've done 6 additional spots, which can be used for employees, but to the extent needed, it could also serve as overflow for patrons. So in short, we've reviewed the elements relative to the overlay district pursuant to, I believe, Article 26 of your ordinance. We believe we've satisfied those elements with the 3 applications that have been presented. We would ask for a review and approval, and we would ask for a recommendation to the zoning board And I'm prepared to have Mr. Bannon come up and to discuss with you the shared parking arrangement that we've developed, the shared parking agreement that we've entered into between between the tenants, and to talk a little bit why, based on these varying uses of business, that this will be an appropriate arrangement that will work well for the area. So if I may bring Mr. Bannon.
Before you go there, you're basing this on 60-person occupancy, correct?
That's correct. I'm sorry. 80, I'm sorry, that's.
No,
80.
that's the first I've heard of 80. All of the information we received said 60, and then there was a capacity factor that the fire marshal said of 66. So where did 80 come from?
It's 60 inside.
But that's not been presented to us, so that's,
Yeah, I can refer to the decision. If you give me one moment, I have to pull up the original zoning board decision.
I mean, I guess my question is, if that was on the original application, then why was it 60 in the ones that, I mean, that's all I've ever seen, 60. And we've been looking at this and spending our time, which is, by the way, unpaid, looking at this and saying, okay, well, then that means that you need 15 spots, and looking at both your presentations and saying, where do we fit those 15 in on the property that you've got? So, I mean, there's a level of frustration here, because we are having a special meeting as a means of accommodating your client, who, by the way, spoke to the Warren Times Gazette and in a way that I found rather disrespectful. There was a lack of communication. There was no mention of the fact that you had violated the agreement. And quite frankly, you know, we're volunteers here. We're aiming to help. I would have kept silent if I were you, sir, rather than, you know, presenting it as though the town itself had somehow been at fault, rather than your own engineers.
Mr. Chair, may I just kind of just get back to the application?
Well, this is part and parcel of the fact that we are not getting the correct information.
Respect.
And I take my job, unpaid as it is, very seriously, as do, I'm sure, all the rest of the members of the board. And without the appropriate information being provided to us prior to the meeting, it's very difficult to make a recommendation or to make a decision. So, Ben, you have.
So quickly looking at the approved variance application, it appears to be 60 inside, 20 outside. I believe that deck was referring to the back deck.
Total spots for approved.
For the back deck, correct? That was the only thing that was proposed at that point.
Correct.
Okay, the back deck.
So I have seen,
Sorry? Correct. I just want to make sure that the board knows exactly where it's in the decision.
What was that, Ben? I didn't understand.
Sure, it is approved, 60 inside and 20 out on the deck, the outside deck. That was referring to the deck in the back of the property at that point, which was part of the project.
correct.
Okay.
So I respectfully, I'm confused because I don't know what disinformation you're saying that was included in the application that's not correct. And I'd be happy, what I would like to do is I'd like to have our expert come up and discuss the shared parking agreement and identify the spots that are available and identify and answer these questions. I mean, can I bring him up here? But the thing I'm trying to state is that even though we have these pending applications based on the leases that we've secured, we are in compliance with parking requirements.
You will be if approved.
That's not entirely true. And that's what I'm trying to suggest is in the interim, after we submitted this shared parking application, we secured off-street parking, which cures the defect in the parking.
So you're saying that
And I would ask you to please refer to your solicitor and ask him whether or not my interpretation of your ordinance is correct.
However, the reason why we're here today is strictly, let's focus back on applications before this board, strictly for a view of the site plan, the parking situation as presented. Let's focus on what the task at hand is.
Well,
That's my recommendation in terms of deviating and whether or not you're in compliance, et cetera. The bottom line is that there's amendments to this original plan, and this is the proper board to listen to those amendments.
Understood, and we are asking for review of those three applications, but I have to represent to the board based on obtaining these leases that there is compliance with the zoning. So
Can I ask a question? So I hear what you're saying. I don't necessarily, I would like to have our solicitor's opinion on this, but I would think that the requirement would be that whatever additional offsite parking that was provided was substantially similar. And so having like valet access with no, confirmed reliability of valet, or have employee only access with no, and I would actually, if you were saying that the original agreement allows for or requires that employee not park on site on the main location, then that would satisfy that as far as I'm concerned. But I think it would be, one question I would have is like, how does it protect the goal of making sure that you're not losing the parking spaces in the shared area on the main parcel? How does that guarantee if for whatever reason, valet service isn't utilized, or you're not utilizing those off parking sites efficiently and effectively, because the customers can't use that, just people you assign would be able to use
Oh,
it.
no, it would be for customers as well, and your ordinance allows that.
So could I ask a question?
Yes.
Have you seen the offsite parking?
Yes,
And would you walk that distance?
Yes.
yes,
Well, but-
Oh,
yes.
Can I get back to the question?
Well,
When I was
I-
reading the lease,
Well, I just want to be very clear, because I think we do need to address what the ordinance says, and respectfully, I'd like to read it. It's section 32-107 of your code, location of parking spaces. And it says, where a parking space is within or adjoins a lot in a residential district, I'm sorry, let me start from the beginning. Required parking spaces shall be located on the premises with the use with respect to which it is required, or if located on another site, no part of the required parking shall be more than 400 feet distance from the nearest boundary of the lot on which the main use is situated. So to answer your question, yes, I would walk there, but your ordinance doesn't speak about whether somebody would walk there or whether valet.
but his question is it practical for?
It is, and
no, I'm not even saying.
I would think that at this point, maybe the parking expert.
that would be
should
great.
Come in here,
Could I just
testify,
finish
therefore,
my question though?
maybe some of these questions can be answered prior to. If not, I think he may be the appropriate
Okay.
person to ask these questions to.
All right, just to clarify, I'm not talking about like convenience. I'm talking about, and this is where I would go to like the substantially similar.
Sure.
And he could perhaps address it, would be, when I read the lease agreements for those, it seemed that they were only to be used for employee parking or like valet. Like,
No.
so if they're like wide open, anybody can pull in and park
These
there?
are- Yeah, so there's two leases, as I'm sure you noted.
Yeah,
One is for the 10-year period.
Right.
It's for 8 spots.
right.
It's for customers.
Right.
They're gonna
Okay,
be,
so
they're gonna
there's-
be signed,
that
they're
one,
gonna
yeah.
be patrolled. These are spots for the restaurant. They're within 400 feet. They're gonna be easily accessible. There are things that Mr. Glynn is going to do to entice people to use those spots. We've talked about things like, for instance, a 10% coupon, or putting it up on the website. So we are going to do things to attract that parking to make customers aware that it exists. At the same time, I need to say that based on what he's done in getting these leases, there is no parking issue. As far as a zoning violation, that said, we have gone to considerable time and expense and due diligence to create a shared parking plan for this development, for these 3 different uses, so that it works well internally.
Okay, well, let's,
So
let's
let's-
continue.
yeah.
Parking guy.
Mr. Bannon, if you could just briefly, and I'm sure members of the board may be familiar with Mr. Bannon, but if you could please just briefly list your accreditations, your experience, education, and as far as testimony before boards in the state.
My name is Paul Bannon. I'm an associate with Beta Group. I've been practicing in the civil engineering, transportation related industry for over 37 years. I've testified in every 37 communities in Rhode Island and Massachusetts and in Superior Court, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, as an expert in traffic engineering. I do a lot of work with communities. I do a lot of work for the Department of Transportation, State Traffic Commission, doing operational and safety designs and studies.
So based on that testimony, Mr. Rick, I would ask for accept Mr. Bannon as an expert, as a professional engineer in his profession, is focusing on traffic engineering.
Any objections? I don't see a problem with that.
Thank you.
Motion to accept.
Motion to accept. Motion to accept.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you for hearing me. I got involved in this project back in, I want to say, late November, December, when the cease and desist was issued. I wasn't involved in any of the original approvals or designs. Met with Sam and Mike, went over what was there, what the issues were. So we worked out a plan to conform to the ordinances of the town. Initially, when we had the discussion, it was if you can try to get off-site parking within to meet this standard, try to do it. So that was always a process that he had started back in December. Reaching out to neighbors, we've got no's, and then, yes, we can have a discussion. So that's been going on for several months. But in the interim, we submitted the application for the shared parking to be in conformance with your shared parking ordinance. He owns the 3 buildings. So it's an ideal situation where he controls what goes in those other buildings. He would not jeopardize his main operation, which he wants to establish the restaurant, with those other uses. So long-term, it's not like you're in a shopping center and you're going to share parking and you have no control over the tenants in the buildings. An owner of the shopping center, he has total control. He can lease it or not lease it to who he wants and the hours that he wants. So with what's there today, it works well with his business operation. He's a restaurant typically open and for the dinner crowd and clients, where a long-term tenant that's been there is a coffee shop, morning to midday. The most recent business is a small cheese shop. She doesn't have any hourly customers or high turnover. So he worked with both of them to establish hours of operation, number of parking spaces required. So what we did is he's by ordinance required to have 30 parking spaces. 30.
That's based on,
That's on 16 seats at the cafe, 80 seats at the Jump Restaurant. And the other building requires 6. So it's 4 for the cafe, 20 for Chomp, and 6 for the cheese shop. So looking at that requirement, we worked out a plan, and you've seen it in the filing, that, coffee shop would have his 4 up until 4 p.m. The Wedge would have theirs 6 spaces to 4 p.m. and that's the time that Sam would open up. And he starts to get busy after 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock. So she closes, so her 6 spaces become available at 6 o'clock. The coffee shop only needs a couple spaces during that time period. He's open till 10. He doesn't have many customers, but that's the hours that he's always kept. So we think that, number one, what's there works well together. And two, he has control over what's there long-term in either of those buildings. So he's not going to jeopardize his operation for any of those others that are there. So if one goes out of business, he may have his office there, complementary to the rest, but what's there works well together, and that's what we're proposing.
I think, our difficulty is we've seen one map. I was in the building official's office half an hour before this meeting and saw for the first time where some of the parking is. A picture would really help here because I have no idea. I know where the two shared lots are. This is
He's got,
this is the prior, right? This is the one that came before us.
that's the, one of the originals. That's not,
The original.
that's not part of this application.
Right, so do you have the new where that, because I must say, I'm.
Filed.
It's the
Full.
package here. It's the package.
Right, but
So
where's
these-
that's the shared lot.
It's the 6.
Yeah, those are the two shared lots, but that's 6 and where are all the rest of the parking spaces?
30?
Yeah,
Right, so does the 30 include the 6 and the 8 shared?
We only have 22 spaces
On the property itself?
but that are available to us between what's on this. It's a little complicated
But-
yeah,
because,
this is what I was looking for, this.
but that's the wrong plan. That's the old plan. That's
Okay,
not,
well,
that's not
what
what
we
was
need is
filed with this
I
application.
mean, all I'm trying to do
It's the
is,
CHOP, it's the CHOP site plans that was submitted with all 3 applications. It's in all 3 applications.
that's one I've done, I don't know. But that,
He's saying that's it.
but this isn't correct, because these are all gone due to the patio being put in there.
Right, and that's what this. This is the existing conditions plan that's proposed. This was submitted with
Okay,
our.
and these two right here,
Yes, there used to be 4.
yeah, but they're in the easement.
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Hold on, can we keep it quiet, please? Thank you.
So on the recommendation of solicitor, I have to state that as the zoning official for the town of Warren, the attorney for the applicant is correct. They have met all zoning requirements. However, there is a deficiency when it comes to the parking plan, and I don't believe Mr. Bannon realized this. There is an agreement between the applicant, Mr. Glenn and Mr. Bullock, that creates an easement from the Water Street curbing into the property. And I don't know if we can pass this around. I don't have this digitally, but if you can see, 2 of the parking spaces were mistakenly placed on the easement because it was misunderstood as to where the easement.
No, there's nothing in the easement that prohibits parking. It's a 20-foot wide easement.
So that I have an agreement right here that states that no parking is allowed on the easement. And I've showed your attorney, this is considered the easement right here. And you have placed 2 parking spots on that. So it's just an error that I believe can be corrected. Just have to move 2 spots.
I also, if I may, to the extent that we just lost 2 of the spots because of the location and the easement, it doesn't change the fact that we still have a shared parking agreement. We could eliminate those two spots from contemplation. And we still have the off-site parking that more than cures the deficiency.
So the offsite parking in the 2 leases, I want to make sure I'm reading those right. I'm looking at this application pages, PDF pages 23 and 29. 23 is the lease with 325 Water Street. Paragraph 1 says the purpose of the parking will be lessee's employees' cars from 9 AM to 11 PM. And then on PDF page 29 is the Old Warren Marina parking lease. And in paragraph 1, last sentence, it says that the 8 spots will be for the purpose of employees' cars as well as parking by patrons. So the 8 will be split up between employees and patrons, and the 6 will strictly be employees, if I read that correctly.
We would agree to limit that to the extent that the board wants to see that to solely customers. We wanted to maintain flexibility with respect to the lease with the property owner, but to the extent that there's an appetite to relegate all 8 to solely customers, we can make that modification as a condition.
Thank you.
And Mr. Chair, if I may as well, Mr. Bullock came to see me at my office on Friday. He wasn't able to attend tonight, but he just wanted me to express that as long as there wasn't parking on that easement, as long as the applicant kept up to the agreement, which is to put a gate to access his back of the property, and that the dumpster wasn't on his property, he was in agreement with this plan.
Honestly, I love it. We've been talking for the last 2 years about how we don't have a parking problem, we have a parking management problem. And this applicant came with solutions to all the problems that make sense or within zoning. I wish more applicants would do this. So by punishing somebody for going out of their way to keep a thriving business that does great in Warren, if we turn this down, I'm pretty sure half of Warren would be killing us.
All
Then-
I'm looking for, Ashley, is I just want to know where the parking is. I just want to see clearly, because it's not clear on any of the information that we've received. I mean, what you're saying, I completely understand. I just want to see it. And when I went to talk to the building official, he said 2 of the spots were not in fact okay. So we want to make sure that we're doing due diligence.
If we need to move them against the building, move them to the other. That's what we have to do.
I mean,
It's the same area, and
I'm-
they
you know,
used to
Maybe it
be
would
the 4
help.
spaces there.
To go through, so does the planning board have this site plan this has the spot number 3 and 4 that are shown in the easement?
This was originally. approved on
There was none.
all of the-
I don't know, apparently, I mean,
There was no easement at the time.
no, I mean, sure.
There was no easement.
Excuse me, could I raise a question? Mr. Attorney? Are you aware that this was originally approved under the easement agreement that applied to the whole warfare? Are you aware of that?
I'm aware that Mr. Glenn has rights to
No, no.
use.
Well, I'm asking you, there was an easement agreement for all of the people who were on the wharf.
Yes.
And that was the basis for the original approval.
Understood. And
Understood.
of those spots, I believe 18 are relegated solely to this lot.
Well, but the issue is that everybody on the wharf has access to all of the spots.
That's respectfully, that is not accurate. There are several categories of parking spots within that easement. There are ones that are for the marina, solely for the marina.
Understand that.
Then there are those that are specifically for public access. Now, could Mr. Glenn's patrons go there? Yes, but can he rely on that to meet the requirements of zoning? No. Then there are spots that are A1 through 18, I believe, that are specifically within that easement, not just for public use, but specifically for that lot to use in connection with those 3 businesses. So
So that's 18.
that's 18.
And then we have
And you
4
need
on
30.
site. Yeah, and then we have 4 on site. So that's the 22 that we're using as a shared.
So that's,
Site, where are they?
There's 2 adjacent to the building, the smaller wedge building, and 2 behind.
so that's where we get the 22.
There used to be 6.
And we're saying that based on the different uses and peak periods for this business, that we would be able to appropriately manage the parking lot with that 8-spot deficiency, 22. But then we went and got 14 spots. And your comment, Mr. Dixon, is right on. We have no problem.
It's Bobian.
I apologize. I'm
That's okay.
the youngest member of the board. So the point just being, we feel that we fixed the problem, But while we were going through that endeavor, I said to Mr. Glenn, let's go out and let's see what we can get for off-street parking as belt straps and suspenders to make this a better development. And he went and did that. And he didn't just get the 8. He got the 8 for 10 years, and then he got an extra 6. And I can tell you that if Mr. Glenn could have got all 14 of those for 20 years, he would have. And to the extent you would want to put an obligation that he in good faith do everything that he can commercially, reasonable manner to secure those in the future, I know that he will do that. That's the intent. But, we were tethered to what the lessor, what the owners of the property were willing to do with us. So, we really did develop a plan that we believe, and I just don't want this to get lost. Yes, the patio went in and we lost spots. But I can tell you, and this is no disrespect to the zoning board, your staff, or this board, this is a better project than was approved 5-0 because we implemented the shared parking plan and because we went out and we got a lot more parking. Okay, this is a better project, and it was a lot of work to do that. So I hope you understand. I know there's some frustration that's going back and forth, but I truly believe that Mr. Bannon can tell you that after looking at the previous approval, based on what we're providing right now, to his expert opinion, let me ask you, Paul, is this a better project as it relates to managing parking on this site and off-street in this community?
Oh, it's a much better plan. And when Mr. Glenn started the construction, he got his approvals, he started construction, was on site and doing the architectural design. His main front door to the building is right in the middle there where those parking spaces are. So he would have an open door and people standing in the parking lot. He felt that this isn't going to work for me. He contacted the town as part of that and asked the question, can I do the patio? When he thought not being a builder, not being a developer, working with the town, said, I'd like to move the patio over here. These spaces would be difficult to get in at best.
No,
So that's why he did what he did. And then he got the cease and desist. So I got involved to help him through the process.
So just offhand, I counted the parking spaces. I didn't count the 2 that are behind Wedge. And there are 37 that I count on the site. Do you think that's about right? I mean, I'm talking about with the exception of the ones that are dedicated to the marina, because those are just.
Well, Trafford.
But
did-
no,
yeah,
but we can't.
No, we have 18 in front.
That's
all we
We can't include those. What
No.
you're talking about.
I know that, but my point is that overall, there's not enough parking on this site for all of the things, for Trafford's, which we haven't even talked about, for the Chomp, and for the other businesses that are there. I mean, there's just not enough parking.
But I would say that the building official has made a determination based on the plan that the parking requirement by zoning has been met with this proposed project, period. It is a bigger issue down there when neighboring businesses in a public parking lot. It can't be put on this particular applicant.
Okay.
He's made his zoning
So-
requirements in terms of parking.
And also there are 80 spaces. I mean, again, I can only go on what I've got in front of me. And, frankly, I'm very disappointed that, to put it mildly, that this 80 has never been raised with the planning board. On this, we're being asked to make a recommendation without knowing what we're approving.
No,
No, I'm not, this is not your issue. Nor is it Mr. Glenn's. I mean, frankly, it's a surprise, to get it at 7:30 on the day of our meeting to find out that, 80 spots were approved.
That was always, it was 60 in the building and 20 out. That was always part of since I've been involved.
We never got that information. I don't know if anyone on the board or 80.
And-
From the beginning.
I would have to go back to
In the 20th
original
season.
application, but
Right,
that is
that's what I
like-
mean,
I don't have that in front of me.
Right.
But-
I think, you have a question?
Yes.
Well, on the prior diagram,
you had spots 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. What Mr. Cabral said, what happened to those spots?
No, this plan has nothing to do with this application.
If I could comment,
We gotta get the right plan.
Regardless, what is in those spots now? 7, 8,
if I could comment on that. So how this all came to light was this plan here is just, unfortunately, this is before my appointment. This plan here does not meet the accessibility of the building. So where 7 and 8 are.
When you say, just for clarification, when you say this plan, are you referring to the plan that we
Yes.
should not be looking at because it's incorrect?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes,
all right.
it's-
I just wanted to have the.
You can't- I'm gonna look to the legal counsel, but you can't refer to that. This
Yeah.
is the plan that's in effect right now. So until,
That is,
The approved.
this is the approved
Okay.
plan.
okay,
Until-
all right, all right,
Until it's changed, this is the approved plan. So
perfect.
just to clarify that. So 7 and 8 have to be removed because of accessibility. Where parking spot 7 is, that's where the handicap accessible entrance is. So when you have a handicap accessible entrance, you have to have a turning radius. So that goes into 7 and 8. As you come down from 7 through 6, 5, and 4, that's your accessibility to the parking, to the handicap parking. So now you have to have a pathway. So 6, 4, 5, and 6 theoretically would have had to been shifted to the west to accommodate that accessibility. Now, when you shift those, now it closes in on 1, 2, and 3, and also onto the entrance. There's also a exterior bathroom door that's right where 6 would be. So this plan here, unfortunately, that's how this came to light, as well as some other issues. But this plan here does not meet the egress of the building and the accessibility of the building. So you can't, and then obviously, after the original approval, that's when the applicant, there was a agreement, that easement that I spoke of, that I believe the board chair may have, that was brought, which moved the dumpster. So now the dumpster kind of comes over and that impedes into 7 and 8. So to meet the standard for the easement and the dumpster, the parking had to be reconstructed. So that's why we're here tonight.
Right, and if I could just add one other thing, looking at the present approved plan, and I know Mr. Bannon had discussed this. Sam came out there and some things, sometimes when you begin
Just keep it a little far from me.
constructing things, you see ergonomically how things are gonna work and if they're not gonna work. And the reality is he was gonna have patrons standing in between three parking spots on each side where they'd be backing up. And he saw an opportunity to beautify the area and make a nice area. I mean, what kind of stone did you use, Sam? Blue stone and granite to construct the patio?
Goodbye, looks beautiful. You know, it's not, it's just, there's the confusion here and the frustration is, first of all, we didn't approve this, the zoning board did. So in order for us to give a recommendation, what we want is just a clarity. You know, what am I looking at and what am I recommending? So we understand it. Now, I understand what you're saying. We took a look at those spots. I thought frankly, the one over in Old Harbor Marina was pretty far away. You need a flashlight and a compass to find it in the dark. But it is part of the ordinance. It's within that 400-foot space. So, you haven't done anything wrong there. It's the concern, all I'm looking for would just be an understanding of where the parking is, because this is not terribly clear. And ultimately, I guess it comes down to the building official that has to say, yes, where, you have the spots that you're saying, because I can't see them and there's nothing that we have in front of us that lets us know that.
With the package we submitted, we provide an existing condition plan to show all the existing parking spaces. And then we showed a future shared parking plan that shows all the parking spaces defined by number, what's assigned to us and what is public.
So the shared ones, I get, yeah.
So those 18 spaces in front are the easement agreement for this lot. So those are the 18 spaces we have. We have 4 on site. There used to be 6 because there were 4 parking along that back line, which now is the easement with the above.
And,
So we removed those spaces.
and Matt said, now 3 and 4, you said can be moved,
Yeah, we'll move them on the other
the
side.
ones that are on the easement currently,
Yeah, we'll move them against the building.
That is correct. They have to.
next to Wedge,
Yes, yes.
right?
Yeah.
Because it looked like there's a fair amount of space there. anyway.
Whether they're there on that side.
Okay.
So to reduce confusion, again, it's just a matter of we all want to be looking at the same thing. And when we get, this isn't the only application on this meeting, right? We've got multiple pieces of documents coming in. I don't know, 200 pages total to digest, right? So we're all trying to just look at the same thing. You're talking about, so I've got in front of me, a 65-page application. Does that sound right?
That's not.
Is that what
It's,
you?
it's.
It's because it's comprised of 3 applications.
I understand. I'm just saying, is that the document I should be looking at?
I believe so. I mean, I would ask, I sent it electronically. If you could give us a page count, that
So
would be
where-
great.
On
Yeah.
what page should I be looking at to see the new parking plan, the diagram that shows the spots as we've all been discussing?
It's a plan that shows proposed conditions.
Okay, do you know what page? What?
Yeah.
But is it in this PDF?
Yes. It is absolutely in the PDF.
Can someone just tell me what?
It's
page-
it's the 9th item in the packet. It should come right after. You're going to see the dumpster relocation package application, the shared parking application, and the wedge application. And then directly after that, you're going to see the site plans.
All right, so I see the list of the 10 items in a cover letter dated January 24th, 2023, right? But those are item numbers, not page numbers. So when using PDFs, it's helpful to use Bates numbering with a document this size so that the entire PDF is tabbed at the bottom with an easily identifiable page number. And somebody can just say, hey, page 25, and then I can find it.
I understand, and I apologize, but there's only 2 site plan pages that are in all 3 applications. And I think we should be able to bring it up on the screen pretty easy.
Well, that's the only one.
It is on page 64 on the,
64.
yeah, on the 279 Water Street thing, page 64.
All right.
But that doesn't show the full plan, it just shows the 2 parking spaces that are.
Well, where on this,
Yes.
where are there parking spaces on this? So in other words, that picture there has what I think are clearly defined parking spaces, correct? Yes. Okay, so page 64 of this PDF,
It doesn't, yeah,
I just see outlines of a lot. I don't see any spots.
yeah, I guess we have those documents that you're saying, and they are in the PDF, but I agree with,
Yeah,
him that I don't understand how I can look at this document
Right.
or that
What am I looking
and do
at?
a
This
calculation.
is just an
as to
out, this
the-
is
you know what I mean?
this is a record.
I get that these 2.
Yeah,
are-
they're
are
all there.
nice.
It's very faint.
Yeah.
Okay.
Here's the original. So it shows all the parking spaces. So this is a lot. That's just an existing condition to show where the parking space.
I mean, just so you know, I'm not crazy. I mean, it's
Yeah.
it's scanned.
It's even more, yeah, but on this one, they're like.
Okay.
So
Well, you
this
can
is
see
the,
where, you know, you can see.
I mean,
the
this is so
confusion.
light that it's not gonna scan.
Yeah, we don't,
On the PDF, you see it.
Right.
The original.
That one, he said he's a scan of.
Yeah, that's not gonna pick up.
Yeah, right, it doesn't.
Screen.
Okay.
That defines all the parking that's within that area.
So maybe to clarify I know this is the older site plan, but A1 through A16, what do you have rights to? This property has rights to all of those. And then on that proposed, okay, there, okay, those are the 18.
Specifically here, more.
And then on that proposed site plan, there were 6 that were identified
Bigger
for
one right
shared
here.
parking agreements.
Right.
Look at this one.
Yeah.
see.
The wedge requires 6.
No,
He's not altering anymore. From 10 a.m. to 4 p.m.
That are angled
The wedge has their
into
signal
that
by
easement.
code. The
Right.
cafe has their,
From.
so after 4 o'clock, when those businesses don't need those spaces
Look at this.
and requires, at 6 p.m. when she closes, he gets her 6 spaces. So he goes from 12 to 18.
It says
And he
3,
needs
4, 5.
And
And
then
then it
you
says
get
3,
2
4.
from the cafe, because they only have 2.
But the 1 through 6 are not replaced on this site. When they're gotten rid of because of pay.
there.
Those are different than the A.
They
one.
didn't exist.
Right, but they're not, on this diagram, they exist, but when they're gone, they're not replaced on this site.
Can you explain, take a look at this, see how you've got 3, 4 here,
Yes,
but on this one, it's got angled.
This is
4.
existing. This is what was there. There were 4 parking spaces.
Oh, okay.
There were 6 parking spaces
I see.
on that property.
But because we put the dumpster back there,
Yeah,
we had to
right.
change the angle.
Okay, so this is the old one, not the new.
It says existing condition. So that's was there before he started.
Okay, so I apologize, but, so 1 through 6 gone. It's the pad. 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 are replaced with just the 2.
There actually were, like I said, on the existing conditions, and there were 6, but because we had to put the dumpster there, we had to lose space. So
Okay,
there's only-
and then those 2, you're saying that theoretically you can adjust them southward in-
Yeah, we'll do-
where they're
yeah,
not
on
in
that.
easement? Okay,
Same area.
right. Okay, that's-
Can you, okay, so can we talk about the dumpster for a minute? Just like to see the diagram of where the dumpster is being relocated, that's all.
Oh, who's that? Me?
Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Matt.
No, so the total of 20 spaces,
There's
Right.
22.
22. Those are required for 80 patrons.
20 years.
20 is
Right.
required for 80 patrons. So that includes those extra, the ones outside in Old Harbor and on Quattrochi's property?
Yes.
Okay, so we can't be talking about those as staff parking. That should be patron parking. Am I correct?
Yeah, no staff parking is parking near the.
I mean, staff can actually park in the municipal
That's-
lots is where they ought to be parking.
And
But
then
frankly,
same
for
goes for
any
both
restaurant, that any parking that we're talking about is designed for patrons, not for staff. I mean, if somebody's gonna smoke a cigarette, they can do it down near the bike path where the municipal parking is. You know, you had said earlier, well, the staff could go there. That,
Well, and I would just say that there's flexibility in the documents, but if it's this board's appetite that we place a condition that both of those off-site parking be relegated to
Like,
patrons, that's fine.
I think we have to, I mean, you know, what we have here is we went through months with another application. And one of the biggest problems was parking on Water Street. Water Street's got a parking problem. The town hasn't yet addressed it. But as the planning board, we have to have the vision to say, you haven't dealt with it, but you know, we don't want to make a bad situation worse. So we want to make sure that there's sufficient parking. Now, if I had my druthers, I'd druther that this parking was adjacent, immediately adjacent. But our ordinance allows for the parking to be 400 and, you know, apparently, and I expect that there's, you know, in Newport, this is something that is done. So, you know, as long as you're meeting those requirements, then we've done our due diligence. But quite frankly, up until this point, I didn't see anything that would indicate that. And also the 22 threw me off because I thought we were dealing with 60. So it was, why are we where did the
Understood.
numbers come from? So you've clarified that, and I want to make that to note that, it didn't come in here, we're looking for a good solution for everybody. And part of that solution is to ensure that Water Street doesn't become any more congested than it already is. Whether that's possible or not, I don't know. I mean, there are other steps that may be taken. Month to month, it's a little scary, and I understand that you're looking for a longer term lease agreement. But in that, those are the six.
Yeah, it's a 6-month lease and then month after that.
Oh, okay. 6 months.
Mutually agreed upon.
Right.
Right, and I just add very, very briefly, obviously, if there were parking lots that were available, that were in closer
Oh, for sure.
proximity, we would have gone for
Yeah,
it.
no, I
And-
get that. But I think, what it does come down to is the number of patrons, and potentially, one of the things that was discussed was, consider 60 as the limit. And then see how that goes in terms of parking. Because quite frankly, 60 is quite a few people.
Well, the 20 is a seasonal element too, you wouldn't have 20 spaces for, 4 to 6 months, because they're outdoors.
Right, no,
So those spaces are gone for most of the, so he'll be up and operating, we're getting snow tomorrow, I think, but, those are seasonable, and they can be managed that, I don't open up the patio until such a time. So that can be managed on site with the shared parking.
All right, having said all that, I just want to make sure I've got the figures correct, that just work with me here on the numbers for a minute. You've got 18 on site, is that correct?
No, there's 18 within the easement area that are assigned to that lot. That's in front. In the shells area.
Yeah,
Shell.
on the site of,
Well, there'll be 4 on the parcel, 4 on the site of the restaurant, that parcel boundary. The 18 are just south of it within the
Along the front.
easement. They have rights to use that.
But the
So-
easement with the town specifically states that those spots can be relied on to satisfy. the zone.
18 that's
Yes.
the applicant can rely on.
and that's correct, right, Ben? The 18 spots that they're counting on include spots within the public wharf area.
Correct, yes.
Okay.
That has not changed.
Okay, all right, hold, stay with me here. So those 18 are is the number 18 comprised of the shared parking agreement with Wedge and Cafe Watershed?
Yes.
All right, so 18 on the shelves, is that for all intents and purposes,
Yes.
correct? All right. You have agreements for 8 offsite on one spot and 6 offsite elsewhere.
Correct,
Okay, so that's 14 offsite, correct?
correct.
18 and 14 is 32, is that correct?
And that was his original discussion.
All right. Now, then we talked about a loss of 2 as a surprise here because of this easement.
We're just gonna shift them.
All right, so 32 minus 2.
Not,
No,
like-
they-
It's
no,
plus,
they-
it's actually plus 4, because there's 4 spaces on his lot.
The 2,
So I think we're at 36.
right.
How many spots can the applicant rely on for this application?
22, and that's clearly in the plans. 22 on site here,
Right,
and then
plus the
14,
offsite.
plus the
Total,
14.
Total,
So it's 22 plus 14, 36,
36. How many are required?
30.
For 80.
No, for the whole thing.
For the whole thing, for Wedge?
All
Oh,
3
okay,
buildings.
I see, yeah, right.
It's 30 for all 3 buildings.
Okay,
Because there is some overlap in terms of operation.
Yep.
Right, on that.
can we turn to the dumpster? Please,
I like that segue. Yes.
all right. Somebody explain this, please.
I wish I had my pointer. Okay, he had built a door that goes to the kitchen. Where he's pointing, that's all gonna be gated. Okay, and screened in for the dumpster. There's a gate for deliveries, a delivery truck will pull in there, and that's the kitchen, back house operation. So that's, and then Employees will come out of that door, back of house and use the dumpster. And then that's an example of a truck emptying.
And just to make sure, this is the proposed, this is the application, right? Not the
Correct.
previous.
That's on the easterly side.
Yeah.
Behind Wedge.
Okay.
Maybe show the enclosure. It'll all be screened in.
I see. Is that a current photo?
No.
Okay.
The cedar fence from
Got it. And where was what is it currently approved as? Is there a photo or of a plan of that?
Say,
Of the original plan for the dumpster?
oh,
This is an application.
It's not, it's done by way of a condition.
Oh, okay.
And it's essentially, for lack of a better term, it's contiguous to the property line, which is the reason why Mr. Bullock had a concern. Because at that time, I believe it was all residential.
I see.
yeah, and there's a back door to that. Was residential structure right there.
All right. Okay.
That's all screened off. Agreed upon.
Can you summarize the three applications? briefly?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
I'll start with the dumpster. This is just simply a modification to the original zoning approval, and it was necessitated by our dispute with Mr. Bullock in the resolution. So that's the first application. The second application is relative to Wedge. It is a modification to the special use permit that they have previously obtained for the zoning board. And it is just limiting their operations further and requesting that they be allowed to rely on the shared parking to satisfy their business's zoning requirements. The third application is the shared parking agreement that we've discussed at length this evening. But again, I just want that, as you noted, to be viewed through the prism that we also obtain this off-street parking. So it wasn't to suggest that the shared parking agreement, that we don't want the relief, that we don't want the recommendation. We believe it creates a much better situation for managing the property. But that said, I just wanted you to understand the background, that we've cured what started the patio and losing that parking space. And we've done it by getting spots in off-street areas, or off-site areas rather.
How would we, then, this is to you, do we respond to all three, or can we do this as a package?
I would give probably individual recommendations on each, as they, although they're connected, they sit on their own. For example, Wedge went before the zoning board as the applicant who was gonna start the business, right? And so I think that's appropriate that we break them into 1, 2, 3 for clarity reasons. And if there's conditions placed on a certain recommendation, certain application, then just to make it clear, instead of just grouping everything, put a condition somewhere, we're not exactly sure where that condition should fall. That's my opinion.
If I may just briefly, I do agree, and I think that when we do the shared parking application, I know that there was a concern that we agreed that the parking off-site would be only for customers. And perhaps we could make a finding in connection with, I don't want to be presumptuous, but whatever motion may be put forth, there'd be a finding that there is in fact these lease agreements in place, but we've also agreed, one, to use it for customers, and two, that we're going to, in good faith in the future, do what is commercially reasonable to ensure that those leases are extended. I can't tether my client to promise you that he's always going to have them, but we can do whatever is commercially reasonable as long as somebody doesn't charge something exorbitant because they understand the exigencies of the situation. We would make that effort.
Questions, how do you, are you going to take any steps to ensure that employees park off-site?
Absolutely. It's a condition of the zoning approval that they be off-site. And I'm sure Mr. Glenn can address that, but there would be sanctions for employees. There will be an employee handbook. There could be a discussion about that specifically. And if that's something that would make this board happy to make sure that the employees understand that that's a condition of employment, I don't see that we would have any objection to that. And I see Mr. Glenn agreeing.
Do you intend to do valet parking, or is this going to be just driven by the consumers?
That discussion about how coexisting situation on site.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the answer should be, as of this time, there is no intent, but it's something that we would look at. And I will tell you candidly, I don't know whether relief would be needed to rely on valet or to use valet, but obviously, based on the genesis of why we got here, if we're gonna do anything different, or we're gonna go in another direction, we're gonna review the ordinance and we'll speak with staff and make sure we're doing it appropriately.
Just to make a note of the current variance, special use does make a condition that parking for employees are off-site existing right now.
I'm sorry, what was that again?
In the decision right now that it's been approved, there is a condition already there saying that employees are to park off-site.
It's already a.
It's already, yes, you're not asking to change that, correct?
That was, actually, that was in the original approval for this project. The original zoning board decision, that was a specific condition. We're not looking for that to get changed. And we're not looking for anything from that original decision to be changed other than these modifications that are before you this evening.
So like, I guess theoretically, you could allow 2 parking spaces for employee because there's 2 more, like, but beyond that, you couldn't. I'm not saying, I'm just saying, but, the other thing.
Yeah, just understand, Mr. Glenn does not want them there anyways. I mean, he wants customers there. Yeah.
Okay, so my question is, if you don't do a, like a valet type scenario, one of the biggest problems that we have is wayfinding. Like, people don't know that that's going to be there, and if there's a way that whether those parking spaces have signage on them so that people know, that would be.
Yeah, so just one, come up, Sam, but just one thing that I'll note is we would agree to a condition that all of these spots that we've identified off-site be delineated for CHOM. So there's no confusion to that. And obviously, we've got a vested interest in making sure with the lessor that these spots are available for our customers. I mean, to the extent they weren't, and somebody else was using them at their bequest, that would be a breach of the agreement. So that there's a lease in place for SAM designated spots. Now, I think the next question is, how do you entice customers to park offsite, or to at least get it out there that this is something that's available to customers? Because to your point, one of them might not be the most popular spot. It might be more advantageous to get, front row seat parking, for lack of a better term. So what did you have in mind to entice patrons to use those spots, Sam?
Yes, so to address the employees first, if any of my employees were here right now, they would testify that the fear of God was put into them about 7 years ago. We realized that our lot on Tyler Street was a little bit too small. So we actually had an agreement similar to the one that we've done with the 2 properties that Mike mentioned for employees. Believe it or not, most employees that we have don't have cars right now. They are younger. The millennials tend to, they take buses, they walk, they bike. So believe it or not, we actually don't have a huge staff that brings a car. And they also know my stance on that. They also know that they don't make money if their cars are blocking spots from people that are coming in eating burger and beer. They know that it hits their pockets. We have to address the wayfinding and the way that these folks are going to find a parking spot and get to the restaurant. We have a pretty significant social media following. We have a very large email list, and anytime that we've ever done that to as a call to action for anything, whether it's pandemic related stuff, when we were doing a variety of different takeout options or delivery, we've done it in a way that's clear and concise and that people act upon. And what we plan on doing with the sites to the north of us and to the south of us is, one, marking them as CHOM parking, patron parking, and then 2, getting interactive with it on social media by take a picture with the car, you get 10% off in the first 3 months or something like that. What we originally wanted to do before we brought Mr. Bannon in was, everybody's talked in this town about, I've been here for 10 years, about how we have a ton of parking, but nobody knows where it is, nobody wants to use it. So we want people to take selfies behind this building. And if you bring it to the restaurant that night, we'll give you 10% off. Things of that nature. And I think that there's a lot of pragmatic ways of solving the problems that I think a lot of people on this board may have, and in town too. I mean, it's a real thing. First thing you hear about is parking.
I think there's pragmatic ways of solving it, by having some fun, by incentivizing guests, and by people just talking about it more. Everybody wants to, I think, complain about it, but I think there's some really fun ways to, especially for a small town, especially for a street like we have on Water Street here in Warren. It is the reason why a lot of people move to this town. It is a lot of the reason why we have a lot of commerce in this town. We want more people to come there, but I think we have to have a practical way for people to kind of, to drive there, to walk there, to bike there, to boat there. And nobody wants this to work more than me. You know, I have the most incentive of anybody on that street right now because we're not open yet and we want to be open. And as a business owner, you have my word that I'll do whatever I need to do to incentivize people to make it easier for us. Because if it's easier for us, more people come to us, they come to neighboring restaurants and businesses. It's a win-win for everybody.
Thank you.
I know you don't have much time between now and 15th, but I would
Not too much.
strongly recommend that you create a very clear parking picture
Mhm.
so that you don't run into what you've run into with us.
Yeah, well,
And, you know that this is the number of patrons we're talking about, and here's how we're accommodating very clearly, because that is, the picture tells 1,000, is worth 1,000 words, is really,
And I will say the
help.
clarity of the site plans with the inability to see the parking was obviously based on my office scanning them. And I apologize for that. And I can tell you that for tomorrow evening, there's going to be, not tomorrow evening, for the 15th, by tomorrow, there's going to be hard copies that are legible. There's going to be electronic that is legible. And I'm going to work with Mr. Bannon to create a concise
I
narrative.
think,
Yeah.
that will, and also a reminder of the fact that it was 80 that's approved. So, because essentially, you're not asking for a change in that, that's existing. And we were not aware of that. And as a consequence, spent a lot of time spinning our wheels, which.
Well, I understand that. I apologize for the lack of.
But that's
clarity.
not, it's a learning experience, unfortunately, for all of us. I just wish I wasn't the student in education.
Understood. And when we're before the zoning board on March 15th, we're certainly going to take the comments this evening into play. I appreciate them. I think it will make for better presentation that night as well.
Okay, any further thoughts? Let's take these one at a time.
Right.
The first one is. Sure. Well, actually, it's not really a public meeting. No, probably. Anyway, what's the,
First petition, for special use, is that the modification for the dumpster? What's that captioned as, Mr. Solicitor?
Just give me a second, please.
Sure.
hey, well. Three motions. Yeah.
We gotta get the caption for it.
Do we have to do this petition for special use, the cheese shop?
Yeah, correct.
Okay.
That was, that's, for modification of the special use permit, particularly talking about times.
It was just limiting the hours, as I had said, because you're going to be, yeah.
Based on.
Yeah, so I just want to delineate the actual captions of each item we're voting on, the petition for special use permit related to Wedge and the, having them rely on the shared parking agreement is one.
Correct.
But I just want to set out each one clearly and starting with the dumpster issue. Just how is that captioned? What is it exactly we're being asked to vote on?
But just give me 1 second, I'm just making sure that we have.
You should just move to a different location.
I don't know, but
But like there's.
See, now you can-
It's an application for something.
Actually shows why we're moving the dumpster, or are you allowed to, I don't understand what we want to really.
Just so the record is clear.
yeah.
Okay,
So is there an overall recommendation to the zoning board on the parking?
So,
it's
I
just,
would suggest taking this application as there's a petition for a variance for parking for the property located at 279 Water Street. So I take that as the first one. If you want to handle that one first.
yeah,
So a motion to approve with the solicitor.
okay. Any conditions on that? The conditions
This is
would
strictly
be,
the variance we got parking,
I don't get.
And that includes chomp and wet.
the entire parking situation.
the entire parking, okay.
Chomp Wedge and in the cafe.
Conditional upon all spaces for patrons only and clearly delineated as dedicated to Chomp.
Second,
Oh, sorry.
And that's including the offsite parking.
It's all the parking.
Yeah, right,
Yeah.
right.
As presented.
Okay,
And,
right.
well, actually, that's the clarification I have. The condition would be that the 2 parking spaces that are shown on the proposed site plan are eliminated that are in the easement. So number 3 and 4 have to be, the site plan has to be revised to reflect those 2 spaces being removed from the site plan. So, and the plan was to then.
Moved from the site plan, not.
What? Well, I'm saying they have to be at a minimum removed.
Yeah.
That would bring you down to 3rd. So they're gonna be moved.
They're just gonna, they're gonna be,
I understand, next to Wedge, and you feel like they can be accommodated there even with the dumpster location and access to the dumpster? Okay, but I'm just saying that needs to be a condition, what you're approving is different from what is presented.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the first condition that all spaces for patrons are of Chomp only and that they are all clearly delineated as such, that the 2 spaces that are currently in the easement would be moved appropriately. That's the second condition of this approval.
Correct. And particularly, it's application number 23-11.
thank you.
Okay.
Second,
Okay, all in favor?
aye.
Hands?
Oh, not me.
Those opposed? Okay, so we have 5, 4, and 1 opposed.
Second application, the board's gonna have to be voted on is the petition for a variance of the dumpster, particularly application number 23-10 for the zoning board.
Make a motion to approve application 23-10, petition to move the location of the dumpster
I second,
as presented.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. It's unanimous.
The last application is application 23-09 for a special use permit and it's for modification of hours of the businesses on the property.
And that was to accommodate the shared parking.
yes, and there was just, there was more limits placed on the hours of operation
Correct,
because we wanted to demonstrate to the board that the peaks worked.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't see any conditions on that? No, okay. A motion to approve? I'll make it. A motion to approve.
Second,
All, okay, all in favor? Aye. Aye, and that's unanimous. Okay. Good luck.
thank you.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, thank you very much, and we appreciate your feedback tonight.
Yeah.
It'll be incorporated on Wednesday, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Good luck. It looks beautiful.
I didn't know.
What did you guys vote? Was it just everything was just grayed out?
Yeah, I mean, you couldn't see any.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is where we see, this is like the printout, but on the monitor, none of those lines are right there. They're just make it clear, like. It's like. Fred, Fred, you need a motion to adjourn.
Oh, wait, we're still. Meeting. Yeah, but anyway. Good luck. Yeah. Thank you very much. Okay, one last item, the approval of the meeting minutes.
Which ones?
Can we do them as a group?
Well, what,
Unless the changes, but.
Yeah, were there any changes to the meeting minutes that we received?
The ones you sent different ones than what I remember.
28th, December 5th, January 23rd, was that it?
I received minutes for 12:15.
Yeah, but I didn't finish those.
Yeah, they've got to come back to us.
Okay,
I didn't realize.
that's what I was confused about. All right,
Okay,
so 1:23, 11:28, and 12:05. That's what we're voting on?
yeah,
Motion to approve the minutes for 12:05, 2022, 11:28, 2022, and 1:23, 23.
second. All in favor?
Aye. Any
All right,
opposed?
motion to adjourn,
Motion.
Second,
all in favor?
aye.
Aye. And the chair is